Mr. Lynch from Massachusetts is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the witnesses for their willingness to testify before this committee and help us with our work. I do want to go back to the point that the ranking member raised, and she is correct in pointing out that about the lack of jurisdiction of this subcommittee for the matter before us. This subcommittee was created for the opportunity to confront the economic inefficiencies in our government. And that's exactly why most members chose to serve on this subcommittee, because of the issue involved. So this subcommittee could be focusing on the layoffs that President Trump has executed, over 200,000 firings of federal employees, employees from the EPA, employees from the Social Security Administration, employees from the Nuclear Security Agency, employees from the FAA, including air traffic controllers. The President has fired NIH researchers working on Alzheimer's and cancer research. This subcommittee could be addressing the layoffs of 3,000 workers at the VA. I mean, that does affect the efficiency of our government programs. President Trump laid off nurses, internists, physical therapists, and staff who care for our wounded veterans all across America. He's even laid off people from the Veterans Suicide Hotline in the middle of a veteran suicide crisis. This subcommittee could be holding hearings to find out why we have 250,000 people, veterans, on a waiting list for benefits and treatment at the VA, and why veterans should be waiting months for an appointment. Veterans' benefits are special, Madam Chair. They're special obligations of our country because those veterans' benefits are obligations that exist because of courageous service previously rendered by our veterans. Every eligible veteran laying in a VA hospital bed all across this country has honorably served. By definition, to be eligible for that care, they have honorably served in uniform on behalf of this country, on behalf of us all. And from Democrat to Republican administration, we have always maintained that veterans' benefits must be rendered. We must keep our promise until now, until this administration, until now. We've also been hearing from farmers who are dealing with Trump's tariffs all across America. We could be addressing the impacts of the Trump tariffs on all of our states. If those tariffs are impacting the export market for cranberries in Massachusetts, I can only imagine what's going on in Iowa and Georgia and Kansas and Illinois and Indiana. The great state of Georgia, with $83.6 billion in agricultural production last year and 325,000 agricultural-related jobs. That dwarfs what we have going on in Massachusetts, and I hear plenty from our farmers and our bog operators. Madam Chair, since President Trump launched tariffs against 140 countries at the same time, and then they retaliated against us on our farmers, we've seen the landscape change. Those 140 countries have shifted their major contracts to places like Brazil, Venezuela, Canada, Europe, and away from Iowa, Ohio, Georgia, Indiana, and Illinois. That's what we should be talking about in this committee. You know, one of my first cases as an attorney, I represented a women's swim team at one of our local high schools, Boston Latin Academy. So I believe firmly in women's rights in athletics. We've come too far to let that regress. But I hope someday we actually have a hearing here to talk about gender dysphoria a gender incongruence, so we can get doctors and families in there whose families and kids are suffering from that disorder, rather than simply punching down at some of the weakest people and most vulnerable people in our society. Madam Chair, I thank you for your courtesy, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields, and I now recognize Mr. Garcia from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I want to just start, of course, by thanking all of our witnesses for being here today. I appreciate your time. I've said from the beginning and from our first Doge subcommittee meeting that we've really not talked about government efficiency or any real serious legislative work. But even I am surprised that this subcommittee is now apparently in charge of policing women's sports. Now, this is nothing to do with our committee's jurisdiction, as said earlier, and nothing to do with helping the American people. Now, Republicans in Congress are trying to destroy our health care and social safety net, as we've seen them do over and over again. Elon Musk is destroying critical medical research programs. We have a measles outbreak. We have an anti-vax health secretary. But apparently this committee wants to spend its time bullying trans kids and athletes and arguing about fencing tournaments. This is not only outrageous, it's also dangerous. Now, this committee is supposed to be about saving taxpayer dollars. And let's be really clear. Mr. Layfeld, USA Fencing doesn't receive large taxpayer-funded grants and doesn't really receive federal funding. Is that correct?
Sir, we do not receive a penny in federal funding.
So you do not receive a penny of federal funding, and we're spending our time in the Government Efficiency Committee debating a fencing tournament and your association, that of you which receive no federal dollars. Let's be clear. All kids and people deserve to be able to participate in sports. And USA Fencing and other sports have the right to lay out rules to make sure their sport is fair and safe. And we know that transgender youth and athletes experience all kinds of mistreatment because of their gender identity. This includes bullying in schools, family rejection, threats of violence, even by some in Congress, and other discrimination. Now, sports participation can actually help overcome some of this vulnerability. Now, we have a wide range of views on this committee, but I want to make sure that people are aware there is some bipartisan consensus. Here's a quote from one of my Republican colleagues who's actually on this committee today, which I want to read. I find it encouraging. It says, "I strongly support LGBTQ rights and equality. No one should be discriminated against. I have friends and family that identify as LGBTQ. Understanding how they feel and how they've been treated is important. Having been around gay, lesbian, and transgender people has informed my opinion over my lifetime." Now, Ms. Goss-Graves, do you know who said this by any chance?
I don't know.
This was actually Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who's, I know, waved on to our committee today. Now, Madam Chair, I'd like to insert into the record this article on CNN that says, titled, "Nancy Mace, now targeting transgender lawmaker, called herself pro-transgender rights in 2023. Madam Chairwoman?
Without objection.
Thank you. Now, Congresswoman Mace, of course, is here today. Now, in November of just last year, Congresswoman Mace posted 326 times on social media about trans people and their access to bathrooms in just one 72-hour period. That's a fact. So I'd like to introduce another article from Newsweek, and it's entitled, this is the title, "Nancy Mace has posted 326 times in the last 72 hours about bathrooms." Madam Chair, can I introduce this into the record?
Without objection.
Thank you. I point this out because it's actually important context. Republicans accuse Democrats of focusing too much on LGBTQ plus issues or trans issues. But we want to talk about protecting Social Security. We want to talk about protecting the cost of living. We want to talk about lowering prices. We want to make sure that all people have health care. But Republicans are so obsessed with demonizing trans people that we are wasting time in our Government Efficiency Committee talking about trans people that like fencing. Now, let's remember, according to congressional testimony from the head of the NCAA, there are less than 10 trans college athletes in 2024. That's less than 10 out of 500,000 total NCAA athletes. Less than 10 out of 500,000. Now, Congresswoman Mace has posted about this issue hundreds and hundreds of times. That's equal to hundreds of individual posts per athlete. All the while, we're ignoring the real issues. I want to remind everyone that we've seen 935 confirmed cases of the measles as of May 1st, according to the CDC. Nearly 1,000 children are getting sick, while our country is hit by crisis after crisis. Let's focus on the 930 adults and kids with measles versus the 10 trans athletes that are participating in college sports. It is obvious to the American public that this issue is being exploited by extremists to divide the American public. It's shameful. It's been clear that Doge is not about government efficiency. It's an attack on vulnerable people. And with that, I yield back.